What if Rin's best teammate is not the only character you should be paying attention to? Most people are focused on Archer, and for good reason. The two are clearly designed to work together, but after looking deeper into Rin's kit, I found some surprisingly strong synergies, a few overrated options, and even some characters that could perform much better than expected. So today let's break down Rin's best teammates, her strongest team comps, and which characters are actually worth pairing with her. Before we begin, as usual, please hit the like and subscribe button. Now if you have done that, let's get this video started. Alright, let's talk about Rin's teammate options. If you want the full kit breakdown, you can watch it on my other video that I uploaded the other day. Now, whenever we are talking about a DPS that heavily interacts with skill points, there is one character we absolutely have to mention first: Sparkle. Sparkle is pretty much everything Rin wants. She generates a massive amount of skill points for the team while also providing some incredibly strong buffs. Most of her buffs are focused on the character that she uses her skill on, but her ultimate buffs the entire team, which is important for a setup like this. For example, if you are running Archer, Rin, and Sparkle together, Sparkle will usually spend her skill on Archer. That's where most of her value goes. But whenever she uses her ultimate, both Archer and Rin receive the buffs, which ends up being a huge boost for the entire team. There's also another layer of synergy that makes Sparkle even better with Rin. Remember Rin's talent? Whenever ally consumes or restores skill points, she grants 100% crit damage for 2 turns. That means Sparkle is constantly benefiting from that crit damage boost, simply by existing in the team. And since Sparkle transfers a portion of her own crit damage to the character she buffs, the synergy starts stacking on itself. Think about it this way: Archer gets 100% crit damage from Rin, and Sparkle also gets 100% crit damage from Rin. Then Sparkle takes that increased crit damage and passes even more of it to Archer through her own buffs. Everything starts feeding into itself, creating an insane amount of value. It's honestly one of the strongest synergies Rin has. If you are planning to use Rin as Archer sub DPS partner or even run her as more of a carry herself, Sparkle is easily one of her best teammates. And speaking of obvious partners, Archer is right there alongside her. I don't think there's much point spending too much time explaining that one because we have already talked about it during the kit breakdown. Their kit literally designed to work together. They have unique interactions that only activate when both characters are on the same team. So right now, Rin plus Archer is pretty clearly her strongest core. Add Sparkle into the mix, let Rin generate gem energy, let everyone burn 3 skill points, and the entire team just starts deleting enemies. Those 3 characters are easily among Rin's strongest teammates. And then let's talk about the next support, Tribi. Tribi is an interesting one because she basically competing with Merchant X Blade for that flag slot, and honestly, at equal investment, she feels a bit weaker overall. That said, if you have E1 Tribi and only E0 Merchant X Blade, then Tribi might actually pull ahead. For a hyper carry setup, I would probably run something like Rin, Sparkle, Permancer, and then either Tribi or Merchant X Blade. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, Tribi might even be better choice in some situations because Merchant X Blade does not really consume skill points. Since Rin's talent rewards skill points usage, Blade does not benefit from that extra crit damage nearly as much. So if you are specifically talking about maximizing Rin's hyper carry performance, I could definitely see E1 Tribi being the preferred option. Although to be fair, Merchant X Blade is still incredibly strong. Even if he does not fully take advantage of Rin's skill points interactions, he's probably still going to perform incredibly well simply because of how powerful his overall kit is. Okay, now this is Sunday's turn. Unfortunately, right now Sunday feels like a weaker version of Sparkle for most of the teams you would want to run. And honestly, that's kind of disappointing because Sunday is a really cool character. There are rumors that he might receive some buffs in the future, so we will have to wait and see what happens. The biggest issue is that Rin teams revolve heavily around skill point consumption. Whenever you are choosing between Sparkle and Sunday for a skill point hungry team, Sparkle is usually the better option. But that does not mean Sunday is bad though. In fact, I would probably lean more into ultimate focus setup if I were using him. Sunday can generate skill points through his light cone, ultimate, and talent, so he still provides useful support for Rin and helps keep the team running smoothly. The problem is simply that Sparkle does the same job more efficiently. Because of that, I would not put Sunday among Rin's absolute best teammates. Either way, he's still a solid option. He's just overshadowed by Sparkle right now. Now let's move on to some of the more interesting options because there are a few characters here that I think deserve some discussion. The first one is Sparksy. Sparksy is another carry that burns through a ridiculous amount of skill points. Since she constantly consumes skill points, she naturally helps Rin generate a lot of gem energy, which is already an interesting interaction. The issue is that Sparksy is an elation DPS. Because of that, you usually want to focus on maximizing elation damage specifically, and since elation damage operates differently from normal damage calculations, I'm not completely sure how some of RIN's buffs, like the defense ignore from her LC, interact with Sparxie's damage. That said, I still think the pairing is interesting. Do I think Sparxie is one of RIN's best teammates? Probably not. Do I think people will even try these pairings? Probably not either, but I absolutely want to see showcases of this duo because it sounds fun. Imagine Sparxie spending an absurd number of skill points during her turn, feeding RIN a huge amount of gem energy, and then both characters just unload massive attacks back to back and blow up the entire battlefield. That sounds hilarious and fun. Would Archer still be better most of the time? Yeah. Now let's talk about the Herta. So the big question is RIN an upgrade for the Herta? The answer is yes, kinda. At least right now, RIN is simply stronger than Anaxia for the Herta. Of course, we are still in the beta, and I would not be surprised if RIN's personal damage gets toned down later, but based on what we have seen so far, she outperforms Anaxia and can definitely function as an upgrade in Herta teams. Now, does that mean RIN was specifically designed for the Herta? No, that's not the case. She's not some game-changing partner that completely transforms the Herta the way people were hoping. However, if you are choosing between characters like Anaxia, Jade, and RIN, then RIN is probably the strongest option for the Herta at the moment. The only reason I would say probably is because Himeko Nova is arriving in the same patch, and she might end up being an even better partner thanks to her ability to provide frequent AoE attacks that will help Herta energy generation. Still, among the current available choices, RIN looks like the best fit. A typical setup would probably look something like the Herta, RIN, Sparkle, and Dancing Permancer. And while that team works perfectly fine, it also raises the question, why not just run Archer instead? At that point, you are mostly building the team because it's fun rather than just because it's optimal. There is some nice synergy here. The Herta buffs RIN, RIN buffs the Herta, and both characters contribute meaningful damage. So if you are a big Herta fan, RIN is definitely worth considering. Remember, she's not the long-awaited savior that completely reinvents Herta's place in the meta. Still, the interaction is interesting and I would love to see more showcases because it honestly looks like a really fun game to play. Next up is Cyrene. Cyrene is another interesting case because she opens the door for a hypercarry style setup with RIN. You could run something like Cyrene, Ceridra, RIN, and Dancing Permancer, and there are definitely some ideas worth exploring there. That said, I think this conversation only really matters if your Cyrene is E2. If she's E0, I honestly don't think it's very impressive. At E2 though, things get a lot more interesting. You can build a team similar to the classic Anaxia hypercarry setup, except you replace Anaxia with RIN. Right now, because of RIN's damage numbers are so overtuned, the team probably performs better than the Anaxia version. The problem is that this depends heavily on beta balancing. If RIN gets nerfed, Anaxia could easily reclaim that spot, and from the design perspective, Anaxia naturally has more synergy with these characters anyway. Speaking of Anaxia, let's talk about him next. Technically, Anaxia can buff a second Erudition character if there are 2 Erudition units on the team, but honestly, this just feels like a worse version of running the Herta. I keep looking at the setup and asking myself, okay, but why? What exactly are we gaining here? It just feels like there's always a stronger alternatives available. I don't really see a compelling reason to run him with RIN, and because of that, I actually think he's one of the weaker options. Now let's talk about Imbibitor Lune. I want to bring him up because, like Archer, he's a skill point hungry DPS. On paper, that sounds like something RIN should appreciate. The problem is that Lune just is not a great spot right now, and unlike Archer, he does not have any of those special built-in synergies that were clearly designed around RIN's kit. So while he consumes tons of skill points, that's basically where the synergy ends. Unfortunately, he's just not a particularly strong option. Honestly, he's probably even worse than the Herta in this context. As much as it hurts to say, Lune is currently one of the weaker DPS characters in the game, and RIN does not really change that. Okay, we are done with the fun yet might be work synergy, and now let's discuss the potential sustain that can work with RIN. Now let's talk about Huohuo and Permancer Terray. Huohuo is actually a really strong option for RIN teams. Unlike Dancing Permancer, she does not really take advantage of the extra crit damage RIN provides through her talent. At least, Permancer's dragon can deal some damage and get little value from it. Huohuo on the other hand does not benefit from that crit damage bonus at all. That said, what Huohuo brings to the table is something RIN absolutely loves: energy. Her ultimate restores energy to the entire team, and that's especially valuable for RIN because a huge portion of her gem energy generation comes from using her old ultimate. The faster RIN gets her ult back, the faster her whole engine starts rolling again. Because of that, I think Hua is one of RIN's strongest sustain options. Personally, I still think Danheng Permancer offers slightly more overall value for this team, but the difference honestly is not that big. In practice, you can pretty much use either of them and get excellent results. If you don't have Danheng Permancer, which is least likely, or if your Hua is more invested, she's going to perform just fine. Don't forget, we still have Fushuan as a sustain. Fushuan is actually pretty interesting because she gives the entire team crit rate. And in a multi-DPS setup with characters like Archer and RIN, that's definitely valuable. A team like Archer, RIN, Sparkle, and Fushuan can make great use of that crit rate boost, helping both damage dealers reach 100% crit rate much more comfortably. The issue is that modern Star Rail content is not always kind to Fushuan. Sustaining difficult endgame fights with her has become harder over time. Honestly, if Fushuan ever received a Nova Flare upgrade that modernized her kit a bit, I could easily see her becoming one of the best sustain options for this kind of team. Right now, though, she's still behind the top sustain choices, so I think she is still a valid option, though surely not as good as Hua or Permancer Terray. And if you happen to own E1 Fushuan, she becomes even more appealing thanks to the extra team-wide crit damage. That bonus creates even more synergy with Sparkle, since Sparkle can convert that additional crit damage into even more buffs for your carries. You can also run her with the Hyacinth Relic set, which works surprisingly well because Fushuan can activate the healing effect through her ultimate. Overall, I still think Fushuan has one of the coolest sustain designs in the entire game. The problem is not her design, it's that she is a version of 1.x character who has not received much support for newer system. I genuinely think she will get some love eventually, but for now, she's great in content that suits her, and a little less reliable in the hardest fights where survival becomes a bigger issue. Still, she's absolutely a viable option and definitely worth considering for RIN teams. As things stand, RIN's strongest team core is pretty clear: RIN, Archer, Sparkle, and Permancer, or even Hua. There are definitely replacement options depending on what character you own, but that's probably the setup that most people will choose. So that's all for RIN Tohsaka's possible team and character synergies. So far, what do you guys think about her? Or if you have any team recommendations or another character synergy, please feel free to comment down below. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like and subscribe button, turn on notification as well so you won't be missing out on any of my Star Rail content. I will see you guys on my next one. Bye bye!